you guys ever call an auto glass shop and the price to replace your classic car windshield is outrageous and their hourly rate is outrageous on classic cars, this is why. This is what we have to clean up every time we come to one of these. Okay, so today we're working on an 85 Corvette. I wanted to go over a couple things for this car because it's a super involved windshield to replace. As you can imagine, I mean, this car is it's 40 years old at this point. These cars, they don't always come apart so well. You run into a lot of screws that may be rusted or screws that are stripped, depending on if anybody's done work on the car before. And also some of the products that are required when replacing this windshield. So these windshields, anytime you replace a windshield on it, you have to put a new header molding on the car. Now the header molding is the molding that goes around the outside of the windshield on the outside of the covers that the top seals to and the doors shut up against and seal to. So this piece of rubber right here, this is part of your header molding, goes up and goes around, and this soft area right here where the top seals to, that's the header molding. Now this molding is a foam style molding. It's just got, basically when your glass shuts up against it and your roof sits down on top of it, it just squishes that foam and creates a seal for everything. Now this molding also has to be sealed to the track that it is down in on the car. So these side moldings, this top molding, that header molding has to be sealed in. We typically go with a butyl in a tube style product. This is Decasil 8936. It goes on really soft and really sticky, but when it dries up, it dries into kind of a harder type material that doesn't transfer as much. So it stays soft, but it seals that product in. I also recommend, anytime you're doing the windshield, we were talking about how the header molding has to be replaced. I think the only acceptable header molding to go on this car is made by steel rubber products. Anytime you're working on these old cars, it is so hard to find rubber products that fit the car correctly and make it so that everything fits nice and tight and doesn't leak. I think steel products in that case, we're not sponsored by these guys. We just use their products in all these classic cars. This is one of the, if not the only acceptable rubber product for these old cars that fit reasonably well at all. So we're gonna get a few more shots as we go through this car. We're getting it apart, starting to do some of these things so you can kind of get an idea of how involved this replacement is. So stay with us, and then as I start getting into it and get it apart a little bit more, you'll see some of this process as we go forward. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this header molding out, and you'll see why we said you need to replace it. This one's actually coming out pretty nice down the side, but you see the old adhesive in here where somebody had to put adhesive on the back to seal it. That's probably, it might even be OEM. But most of the time, this header molding here, it just falls to pieces. Pro tip on a lot of these screws, if you'll take your drill, rather than using an impact, take a drill and put your ratchet mode on, or your hammer mode on, it's probably ratchet, I guess is what you call it, and start on a real low setting, get in the screw, and if it is gonna be super tight to where it may strip out, like if you had an impact on it or if you were trying to pull it by hand, you can use this ratchet mode and it will help. See, that one's super rusted out. The Phillips head part of it is kind of gone. I'm sure somebody's gonna say something about me choking up on that hammer, but I'd rather hold the hammer close and not hit paint than the alternative. So there's our ratchet mode. Let's go to number 3. Let's see. Beautiful, that worked. Well, and I was able to take that bit and just drive the head of it a little bit, make it so we were able to get on it. So let's work our way around. And then there's screws all the way down this guy. So we run into the chance of this being like that all the way around. But I got to get in here with something and clean all this adhesive out so we can make the new header seal up pretty good. But this is where it always comes apart, up here. See, it's starting to rip right there. Most of the time what'll happen is this adhesive will be strong enough that it'll start to rip this, this whole unit. And I'm getting the screw out of there, so I don't mind laying it up there. But it'll start to rip the whole unit, and it'll leave the edges of this header molding inside the channel. You can hear it ratcheting right there. And these screws are out of place. These two were switched from the other side, so somebody's evidently had this off before. In fact, this thing must have been leaking before because somebody's got it slap full with some kind of adhesive. It looks like kind of foam or epoxy or something. But this header molding come off in one piece, actually, with the minus a couple tears. But either way, we've got a new one, so we're going to replace it while we're here. And then now we got to go across, and we'll start at the top. And now you can see every one of these screw heads are filled with adhesive, whatever kind of adhesive it was. So I got to take a pick tool. We can get the heads of these things cleaned out so I can get a Phillips head bit in here and start pulling this stuff out. So these covers are kind of a, I guess you'd call it three-piece assembly. And I'm seeing screws all mismatched up here, so somebody's clearly been into it. But it's got, typically has the header molding, the channel that the header molding snaps into, which is all silicone dome. Now I'm getting into it. I gotta get a pry tool, and then there's a an inside molding which covers the edges of glass. Once I get it apart, we'll show you that to you. Silicone is a no-no, folks. Our urethane products do not bond to silicone. If there is silicone contamination on the car, it has to be stripped and replaced with a urethane safe product. But also, it makes it, see all the silicone in here? It makes it so that we can't get these things apart sometimes without damaging these chrome moldings. And the last thing you want is your classic car to have hard to find reproduction parts that don't fit very well because somebody used silicone. And this is an absolute mess. If you guys ever call an auto glass shop and the price to replace your classic car windshield is outrageous and their hourly rate is outrageous on classic cars, this is why. This is what we have to clean up every time we come to one of these. If, in fact, it's so rare to have one that's done right, it's a pleasure to work on one when you do finally get one. So we're gonna have to see if we can come up with some screws for this gentleman because he's missing all of them. Packed full of silicone, just absolutely full of what looks like black RTV. And if you look at it here, it's not even really, it's not doing anything. It's just pulling right out. It's not even really sealed. All this silicone around the windshield that was packed in here. When I cut this windshield out, this is all got to be stripped down to bare metal and resurfaced because none of our adhesive products will stick to this. But you can see the rust even goes down in here. Or I say rust, this is, some of it's rust, this frame might be steel, but you know, these Corvettes are fiberglass. But the structural components are mostly a combination of aluminum and fiberglass. I think on some of them they put some steel on them for these pieces that had to be harder, which if I'm seeing orange rust, that tells me this is steel rather than aluminum, because aluminum doesn't corrode rusty looking like that. Evidently, it's old enough that it's butyled in. So this is this adds another level of complexity to the job because all modern jobs must be installed with modern adhesive. And I broke my line because I wasn't paying attention. But in order for the modern adhesive to go on it, all of the existing butyl must be stripped off of the car completely. You see, I'm just pulling a lot of this adhesive by hand. It's so soft and deteriorated. I absolutely hate about these old sports cars. They're super cool, but I'm a pretty big fella. And it is tough getting in and out of these things over and over working on them. Now, let's see if we can get this last little bit. Set this one here. unfortunately, I have all my glass stands taken up, so let's find somewhere to lean this up at so we can look at it. So, the old school method of doing all these cars was with a butyl tape style seal. Everything is since going to glue in. But all of you old heads out there, you guys remember this. This windshield originally come urethaned in. If you look right here, that's urethane that was trimmed off is what it looks like. It may be butyl. It feels like urethane. It's urethane. Somebody butyled this windshield in, and when they butyled it in, they didn't even put the butyl in the right location. So I bet this thing has been pouring water over the years. Like it didn't, none of this is in the right spot. It followed the edge of the glass. So this thing has been replaced before. It looks like it's an OEM part. So somebody put a new OEM part in it. And up the sides, let's see, butyl. It's just packed with silicone. I mean, the windshield's not even attached to the butyl. It's just silicone jammed in here. All of these old cars, we get to them, and either the replacement methods at the time are not the current standards and it's a mess, or you just see outright sloppy, terrible work like this where somebody they cut this windshield out from the factory that had urethane, and then they turn around and put it back in with butyl, didn't put the butyl back in the right part or in the right spot, so it didn't even seal across the bottom. It wasn't even on, the seal wasn't even on the pinch weld. And then up and down the sides, it evidently leaked so bad going forward that they had to come back and put silicone on it. This butyl right here isn't even attached to the A-pillar. It's attached to the interior panel. So evidently water was pouring in here, and that's how come that's slap full of silicone. Luckily the silicone's not sticking to it very much, so it'll make it easier to clean up, but all this silicone is a problem. It's all got to be stripped. So we'll get it all cleaned up, get it resurfaced, and I'll come back to you and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
A few hours later.
All right, so we're back at it on this 85 vet. We had some other stuff scheduled, and this job ran much longer, and we anticipated it running this morning, so we had to get out, do everything we had to do mobile, and now we're back at it here. It's like 6:30 this evening, and we're back at Glass Express trying to get this car done so we can make room for everything on the schedule tomorrow. Before we got out of here, I was able to strip down all the corrosion on it that you've seen in the video when we first got this windshield out. We got all the corrosion stripped off, but earlier I mentioned how silicone should never go in cars, and I wanted to show the contamination issue that you run into. So, come on, however we can see this. It's very difficult to see, but even though I stripped this and cleaned this multiple times, you can see where my primer is rejecting. It's fish-eyeing across this top here in this divot where there was silicone inside of that gap. So, silicone is a no. Just no. Don't put silicone RTV on anything other than what's under the hood when working on anything. If you're trying to seal anything up, that silicone contamination in this steel across the top of here is causing my products it's counteracting with my product and not allowing my product to properly bond, because we're having trouble getting all of this silicone etching stripped down off of here. So we're going to strip this back down one more time, take down a little bit more metal, and really get on this thing with some acetone and really scrub it and see if we can get the rest of it out, get a fresh primer coat, and as we're going back together, I'll come back and show you some of the other stuff we got going on. All right, so we finally got this thing cleaned up. We've got a windshield set in it, and the way we decided to put this windshield in, the way I do every one of these, is we run a tall bead of adhesive on the windshield itself, and then we place the side moldings on, the top molding on, get everything screwed down so we can adjust the deck height of the windshield based off of these moldings on the side. You don't want a big giant gap on it. Like actually right over there, I'm seeing a bow in that molding, so we got to do a little tweaking on it to get it to lay down flat against the windshield, the one on the passenger side. But this over here is nice and tight and pretty, and this across the top is tight and pretty. We had to go in here and clean up all that junk. So, and the way we go back together with this, I just got some old screws in it right now, kind of holding it up so that, you know, everything's in place while we get ready to take it back off and put some sealing on it. But we go back in, all of our screws are this old style screw, and it's got like a wax type material, rubber type material on the end of it. When we go back in the car with it, these seal up all of these screw holes. But here is the method that is used. My urethane gun over here is making a big mess with the butyl in a tube that's used for it. So the way we seal all this up, all of these moldings where there is a gap, or where they're lit together right here, water could get in there and seep through that and just leak right into the car. So all of these pieces have to be sealed together. And the procedure we do is butyl in a tube. It's a DecaSeal product. So we'll get these moldings off of here so they're out of the way initially. And I'll come back, stick them on one at a time. And we go and take this non-hardening adhesive and step up here. We got a good clean surface. Come and lay us a little thin bead all the way across here. This stuff is messy if you aren't careful with it. And I got a spot I got thin right here and I don't like it. And we put that on. Over here and give us a little loop. All right, got the stringy part done. So once we get that on, we lay our first piece in. Let me get my screw hole lined up. So now I'm gonna lay it on. Now when I tighten that up, you can see it oozing right out where the screw holes are. That bad boy will be tight. It will seal up. We won't have any sort of leaks that come through there. And that's the first step. Like I said, this is two-part. You've got the molding that covers the edge of the glass. Then you've got the channel that the header molding goes in that seals the top. So you come back across again and run a bead on it for the header molding to sit in. Now, line our holes up again, and I can't hardly see them. Now, that squishes out. And that bad boy's got sealant in there all the way. Now this stuff, when it first goes on, it's super sticky, super stringy. It hardens a little bit, but it always stays soft and it always stays flexible. So this thing will be sealed for many years to come for this gentleman, and hopefully he'll never have to go through this process again. We're gonna get all these moldings put on here. Get everything looking clean. When I get to the header molding and get ready to start going back in with the header molding, we'll come back and we'll do a little bit more. All right, so we're finally ready for our header molding to go back on here. I'm kind of getting our screw set in here. I've got our butyl in a tube already laid out in our channel. Everything else is already sealed to each other. What I find to work best on these is I will put both corners of the header molding in first because they've got screws that hold it, and then also both ends have two screws down at the end that hold it to the body of the car. So I will go ahead and start fishing this one in and see if I can get the screw drove in there. These things can be kind of a pain to line up sometimes. I think somebody has put a bigger screw in there than what calls for, and the hole is too big for the factory size screw now. Let me see. see. Oh, this is a quick little pro tip. If you're having trouble finding through these big gaskets and stuff, finding how it all lines up, you can use a pick tool to get in there first. To try to line it up. This guy's not wanting to back out on me, it's sticky. Yep, I think that hole's too big. I found the other screws they had in it that were bigger than the ones that's supposed to go in. Boom, she locks in like she's supposed to. All right. Make sure we don't have any twist in this guy. RJ pulled a late one with me here tonight to try to get this thing done, because we are just slap covered up tomorrow and we can't afford to let it roll over to the next day. Beautiful, got that in. So this header molding, actually, it's got 2 lips on it here, and then this has got 2 channels for those lips to go into. So I roll it in one side and just start working it in. It works best to get one side in the channel and then work the other side down in it. And then if it's not all the way down in, you'll see like little high spots in it right here. If you want to come up here and see the like high spots. So what you do is you just got to keep working it until it lays all the way down in there and fits nice and snug. And this is crucial. This has got to be done right in order for this top to seal. See, like right here, we got a high spot. That is not worked in. So it's the same thing. We're just gonna keep chugging right along, making sure we get it down in there. All right, so once we get this header molding back in, throw the top back on it, and we'll come back and show you what the finished product looks like. We got a little while of messing with this, trying to get it seated in there. All right, so we finally wrapped up this Corvette. We wrapped it up late last night. I think me and RJ finally got out of the shop at, it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock last night. And it turned out real well. I had to kind of go back and adjust a couple things on the sides where the door glass fits up into the header molding and adjust it to get it sealed up a little tighter. But this car is a really good example of how difficult it is to bid out classic cars. Typically our pricing structure is on these cars is basically it takes as long as it takes, and we have an hourly rate on it. I didn't bid this one out this way. I bid it out at 3 hours thinking I could get it done, and every time I do that it bites me, and this one was no exception. So we had, I think we had close to 7 hours in it by the time it was all said and done, and I quoted it out for 3 hours initially. So we're going to honor that price, but you know, this is something to expect coming forward. Whenever we get classic cars, you've got classic cars that you want to bring to us. There's just so many variables in these cars where somebody could have put this thing together and did it wrong, or there's damage on it because maybe neglect, or the car is set outside. There's just so many variables as what can cause issues and cause these jobs to run longer than they would have initially 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But either way, for any of your classic car needs, you can come on by. 820F Paris Island Gateway. You can shoot us a call at 843-379-7222, and we'll be glad to take a look at what you got and give you a rough ballpark of what your parts will cost, and then the hourly is just kind of however long it takes, and you know that's how it has to be with these classic cars. So come see us.